Jeremy Jackson with DripMadeLive. I hope you're enjoying the content, and if you like this, you can watch it happen live from 8 to 11 p.m. Central Time on most weekdays. You can find that at YouTube, at Rumble, or at X, all at DripMadeLive. So, thank you for joining us. Hit all the buttons and enjoy the show.
All right. There he is. Let's get that guy in there. Now the ultrasonic both heats and vibrates that piece. And add a little bit more solution to it. Alright, got our steamer heating up too, so we'll get to run that here in a second. Alright, so our considerations for working with sapphire. It's less hard than diamond, but that doesn't contribute, or that doesn't impact the way we set it, really. You can squeeze on a sapphire about as much as you can with a diamond. You have to be a little more careful with the girdles. You can't grab it like a diamond and spin it around in a setting. You're going to chip the edges, but we're going to take a good look at the stone here in a second. Make sure we assess what's going on with it, see if there are any inclusions we have to pay attention to, and we're going to see how it might fit in our mounting here. So let's take a quick look. Our steamer's acting kind of funny. Hold on just a second. I'm going to make sure that's not going to blow up on us. All right, that's getting hot. Okay. So let's take a quick look at this stone. Back to microscope. Alright, I'm going to get that out of the way and just hold it here. We're going to take a good look at it. Okay, so what I noticed right now, got a couple of little inclusions in it that we might have to be concerned about because they sit where our prongs are going to go. Now this stone has a couple of little abrasions on the top, but that's a-okay. With sapphires, that can happen. Okay. Yeah, on that we're looking pretty good. Now the girdle gets kind of thick in some of these spots, but we're going to account for that in the seats that we cut. Now that looks like a natural inclusion on the side there, kind of a little hickey. Well polished generally. Good color for a yellow sapphire. Okay. If anyone has any questions, please throw them to me in the chat. If you if you don't have an account with Rumble, I don't think it'll let you chat, but it only takes a moment to set up an account. If you have any questions whatsoever, I'd be happy to answer them. All right. Okay, I like this stone. We're going to get it ready to go in this mounting. So let's get a look at it, how it lines up on our prongs. This I like. These prongs are already canted outward rather. So if the stone doesn't drop into it too far, sits nicely on the edges, I know that it's probably going to line up where I want it once I drop it down into this mounting at the appropriate height. A pretty nice mounting here. Let's take a quick look at it before we move on. Relatively good stone setting work. The prongs are a little funky on some of these. Very nice stones. Let's see. This is... a 0.93 carat total weight on the melee. So nearly a carat of melee stones. Right now it's a 6.5, but if you want this piece, once I get it finished, I can size it to any size you like. So slightly larger stones around the halo. I like this basket setting, and it's very well polished. You can tell this is a cast piece and was finished by hand. They didn't quite get all the casting texture from the inside of this, but that shouldn't show. You'll see very little of it from the top, and when I go to polish the inside of the seats, we'll take care of some of that along the way. Overall, very pretty piece. And a good choice for the center stone. Okay. It's French set on the side, meaning they have a little bitty, I'll try to zoom in here for you, little bitty micro prongs here, but they're split. Well, I wouldn't call this French. This is just micro prong, but they're split with an angled chasing tool to tighten the stone. I'm not a huge fan of setting that way. I've seen some very loosely set stones that way. You can tighten them up with the beading tool, or they seem to come loose pretty easily, is how I'll phrase that. It looks like all of these are nice and tight. I'm just giving them a little jiggle, see if any of them move. Let's do the other side real quick. It's good to check these more than once. Kind of got a chipped stone on the edge there. It's good to check these more than once as you go, because the ultrasonic can vibrate the stones just enough where they get loose. Okay. All right. Let's get this bad boy in. Okay. With a sapphire, you'll typically have what's called a native cut or a natural cut on the underside, on the pavilion. That's going to mean it's got a much deeper belly, and the belly, or by belly I mean this shaped, or the shape of the pavilion. It kind of curves downward. So we're going to have to cut to allow for that. The crown on this stone is kind of high, so we want to set it as low as possible in this mounting. But here's one thing to note. You can't go too low. Because of the depth of this stone. Best I'll probably get away with is about right there, because of the depth. So I'm going to go ahead and make a note of that on my prong. And I just can't go too far down. Looks like I won't get away with more than halfway down these prongs, but that's okay. So let's go about halfway down our prong, give ourselves a little notch, just a guideline. Then I'm going to take my set of dividers and I'm going to match that all the way across. I'm going to set the divider on top of the stone next to it, give that a little notch, same thing. And this is making a pretty bold assumption that the stone setter who did the melee work on this job set them all at the same level. Not always the case, but you know, we get lucky. Okay. I'm going to do that on the other side just to give myself a little guideline. On a bigger stone like this, I tend to do this a little more. On something small where I can visually see all 4 prongs pretty easily and can compare them, I may skip this step. But big stones, gotta make sure they look nice. Alright. Gotta make sure they're matched all the way across too. Okay. Now, we're going to use a little different tack when we cut these. I'm going to do a preliminary cut, and then I'm going to cut the seat for the belly after I get a better idea of how it's going to line up in the mounting. So first, let's set it here. We're going to take a look at the sides of the prongs and get just a general idea of how I'm going to have to cut this. Hoo-wee, that is a big fat belly on this stone. Okay. Tall and deep. One thing I just noticed about this mounting is the prongs are not exactly angled at the same angle, so I'm going to go correct that before I get any farther. That'll give me a better idea of how this stone's going to sit in place. That guy needs to come over just a budge. All right. Okay. Okay. Let's drop this guy back in and see what it looks like. Okay, it looks like it's going to have pretty good orientation across the table. However, this facet is cut slightly off center. And so is that one. So we're going to do our best to make this ring have a nice profile from the top and not worry too much about where the facet junctions lie, because, you know, being a native cut stone, there are going to be some variations. Some discrepancies in what would be a typical cutting. Okay. All right, so first thing we're going to do to cut seats is cut a preliminary seat at the height that we marked. I'm not going to go very deep. Whoop. All I'm going to do is give myself a little notch that I can work off of. Now, being an oval stone, I don't want to cut straight into the prong. I'm going to cut with a slight bias toward the shorter ends. Now this is just a preliminary cut. We know we're going to cut more away. We know we're going to shape it a little bit differently. So we're going to go ahead and get a good notch in there. See my loose stone right there? That's what I was talking about. Check these along the way, and we'll tighten them up before it goes out. Okay. Same thing here. And then... Okay. I'm going to cut these just a hair deeper on this side. And then we're going to start shaping it for that stone itself. I like that height. We can get a quick measurement of our stone, just to confirm we aren't too deep with the culet. .41 millimeters. That is a deep one. All right. So we've got the preliminary seats cut. Let's take a look at the stone one more time and get an idea of what the final seats are going to look like. So, just set the stone back in place. We're going to look down the prong at an angle and see what we might need to cut away. So these are going to be really, really, it basically falls straight down off of the girdle. Really, really steep seats. And looking at it from this angle, it's going to be slightly steeper on one side of the stone than the other. I could go ahead and mark that. Now, we want this table to be level on the ring. Looking at it from this angle, you can kind of tell that the culet, the point, there we go, sorry, the culet, the point, is not exactly centered on this stone. That just happens. That is something you deal with when you deal with sapphires. Sapphires or any colored stone, not exactly going to be cut the same way a diamond will. So very flat on the top, slightly off-centered on the culet. So we're going to cut the side that it's a little closer to, a little steeper, and this side a little shallower. So let's do this next. So we're going to use the same burr we did before. We're going to angle it slightly away after we cut a hair deeper. Okay. Go around and cut these a hair deeper. Now I'm going to use the same strategy I did on the little solitaire pendant. I'm going to cut my bottom seat first, then I'm going to allow for the girdle while I cut my top seat. The girdle on this one changes, so I'm going to make sure that every time I put that stone back in, I put it in the same way. So I'm going to grab a Sharpie here in a second and mark that stone on one end so that I know which way I need to point it. Okay. I like those seats. So now I'm going to lean my burr away and I'm going to start allowing for the deeper angle. Now, I'm not going to be able to do as much as I want here because of this little undergallery, but we can cut that away too. Just trim it back because the belly of the stone, I think, might end up contacting that. So, start making that seat just a hair deeper at a time. That is a really steep seat, but that's what we're going for. Same thing on this one. A lot of this job is being able to look at something and visualize the negative for it. So looking at a stone and visualizing the space I need to allow for that stone. You can get good at that, you're golden. Some people don't have that, some people do. I don't claim to have been born with it, but I certainly had a lot of practice. Okay, starting to get those preliminary seats a little bit bigger, matched up to what we're gonna have as far as the stone goes. Okay. Yep. I'm going to take the stone in and I'm going to put just one end in and take a look at how that matches up. Just get a general look at it. We're not looking for perfection here, just that we're on the right track. Yep, so you can kind of see from this angle that seat is going to have to be way steeper. All the way around. So let's get to that. I'm going to change tools. Go with a slightly smaller 70-degree burr. Here we go. Whoops. One moment, folks. Let's check on the steamer and see if it's up and running. Okay, let's test fit on one side, and we'll come back and do the other. Starting to get that a little closer to. On the shallower side, it looks a little bit better than the steeper side. So we're going to have to go ahead and mark our stone. Make sure we're putting it in the same way every time. Come on, big guy. There we go. Alright. That's starting to match up well. And that one is too. We just have one prong that's a little out of whack, so we'll come back to it. Let me grab a Sharpie real quick, and we'll mark that stone so we don't get it confused. Okay. Oh man. Of course. Dead Sharpie. So, we'll use the stone itself. On this abraded side, we're gonna make sure we know which side that is. Okay. So abraded is closest to the steep side. Mm-hmm. I'm going to mark one of these prongs to know which side is going to be our steep side. Just draw a little X on it. There we go. That is pretty close. Looking good there. Let's check this side again. Make sure we turn our stone the right way. That prong needs to go a little steeper. So does this one. So we'll cut both of those a hair steeper. Okay, find our mark. Let's get another test fit in here. In and out and in and out. These stones, you've got to check them. Make sure we get them nice and lined up. That I feel good about. Now we have to note that as this stone goes further in, that angle is going to change to be a little steeper. So we're going to have to go a little further visually to make sure we allow for it. Make sure we aren't putting pressure on any of those pavilion facets. Okay, there we go. Let's pop that stone back in and see what we look like. Yep, we got it in backwards. And that's why we mark these things. Perfect. Okay. I like how that's lining up on that seat. That one could go a hair deeper. Let's address that right away. Okay, this is starting to come together nicely. I think we've got the bottom of the seat worked out pretty well. Let's take a quick look. Making sure we turn this the right way. Okay, we can also take a look at it sitting just like this. Okay, kind of like that. Okay. I think I might have got that backwards. There we go. All right, I love that. That is looking good on both of those. Let's check the other side real quick. Okay, so we've got the pavilion seats ready. Now we need to start cutting for the girdle. So, on the end, we know it's going in the side. We're just going to take a look at how fat the girdle is where it meets the prong. There it is. Okay, so pretty fat on this side. Fat, fat, fat. Thin, thin. That side is fat. That side is thin. So on these two prongs, we'll leave a little less room for it. These two prongs will leave a little more. I just visually judge the height of the girdle, and then I cut upward from our mark, approximately that height. With colored stones, I like to go just a hair higher to make sure we don't chip the edge as we bring the prongs down. So, visually, I've got a good idea of where I want to cut those seats. I'm going to go back to our larger 70-degree burr. Should have left that out. Okay. Okay. And we're going to start cutting for the crown and the girdle. Now, knowing that this has kind of a shallow crown, I'm going to angle the burr just a hair and cut that at a more shallow angle so that I can stay off of the girdle as much as possible when I go to pull the prong down. Oh, that's that. I'd prefer to spend a little more time on my seats, because you can always fix them. What you can't do is fix a broken stone. You have to send it off to a cutter, they cut it smaller, and it's not the same stone as it was before. Okay. So, here's a good angle. You can tell the side that I cut for the steeper side and the shallower side just on the shape of the seat and how far I had to go down for it. Let's put that stone in and look at it from this angle and see how we feel about it. Well, looky there. That nearly just dropped right in place. We're not entirely happy with that if it does. There we go. So what I want to do is make sure, absolutely sure, that we're able to make the table on this stone level. Roll that back out so you can see what I'm thinking about here. Need to cut that guy a hair higher. I'm going to do that now. If I can get the stone out. This one I like. That seat matches well. Looks like we're going to be able to get the table on that stone to line up correctly. Now this guy, we're going to have to do some work on him. Pop the stone out. I'm going to turn it around. See if maybe I made a mistake in the direction. Nope. Well, would you look at that? Got that sucker bent all out of whack. That's why. There we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and cut the top of the seat again. And the ones that I was nervous about. There you go. Just using my guideline there. To get an idea of how tall I want it. Okay. Stone going back in. I'm going to hold the stone in place just briefly. Try to see how that's matching up. That seat needs to go a hair higher. Just a hair. Oh. Scratch that. That seat is perfect. That prong, after I bend it over, will be a-okay. And it looks like I matched up on that one pretty good too. So, we are pretty darn close to setting this stone. I'm going to take this seat a hair higher. There we go. take that seat just a hair higher. I'm going to go to the opposite side just to make sure we have enough relief here. Okay. Stone's going back in. I'm going to hold it down on the seats and take a look at how they match and see if I need to make any further adjustments. But we are getting pretty close to being able to set the stone. Like that. I'm okay with that one. That seat is good. We'll look at them all from the other side just to make sure. I think that's going to be okay. All right. Get our stone back out. Now we're going to address the little flanges of metal on the sides of the prongs that we get from running that round burr on it. Just going to gently cut that metal away, just like that, right there. And that, okay. And then we're going to take a fine file. And smooth out those edges. And I can go ahead and take away my my guideline when I do this. It'll polish out, but we want to make sure anything that we polish is as smooth as we can get it before we polish it. Use as little polish as possible, because it can misshape the prongs, it can cut away too much metal, it can turn very nice prong tips into these ugly little lumps. So we want to polish as little as possible. Okay. All right, I like that. And one thing I did notice is it's not going to contact the under gallery here, so we don't have to grind any of that away. I did check and make sure that our culet isn't going to poke through the bottom of the mounting here. There we go. Okay, so we're going to go back to our polishing. A little wheel brush. We don't need to use the end brush on this one. We can do everything we need to with a wheel brush. So we'll do that. Provided we can find it. If I were an end brush, where would I be? Wheel brush. Oh, right where you're supposed to be. Okay. Very lightly polishing the sides of the prongs, polishing in the under gallery, polishing our seats gently. Okay, sides of the prongs here, just a gentle polish. And take away our guidelines. Now we're going to have to polish these prongs again, but I like to get them as close as possible. When we go to bend them over and to actually set the stone, you'll get little ripples in the side as the metal is compressed or stretched. And a quick polish kind of takes care of those. Makes them look nice and clean again. There we go. This is coming together well. And I did misspeak. I think I will use an end brush on the inside, just to make sure we get all those dull spots from casting out of it. So. If you're just now joining us, my name is Jeremy Jackson. I am your host for DripMadeLive. If you have any questions whatsoever about the process, please throw them into the chat. I would love to answer them. So we're going to go ahead and polish the seats. I'm going to run it in reverse and polish it the opposite direction. And we're going to clean up some of these little tough to reach spots. I really like this polish. This is Mirard polish. It's actually a watch case polish, but it works extremely well on gold. It cuts relatively well, meaning it'll take away scratches and burnish, or it cut away the metal, but it also burnishes very nicely. Gives a nice shine. Okay. Now I did notice that a couple of our end stones are a little loose. I want to get those tight before I set that stone, so I don't take any chances on breaking it with my beading tool. So I'm going to use a beading tool here. I'm going to gently roll the metal down. Make sure these end prongs are nice and tight, end stones are nice and tight. There you go. That did not take much effort at all. Now, if you've got a keen eye and you are watching with a little bit of jewelry knowledge, whoop, that was loose again, you'll notice my beading tool is not round. Ask me why. Okay, we got that stone tight. We're just going to make sure all of these are just as tight. And I will probably come back and check these after it goes into the sonic, just to make sure everything's still secure. Okay, so because I duffed up the end of those prongs, I'm going to give them a quick polish too, because it will be hard to reach once that bigger stone is in place. Normally I do this with a wheel brush. End brush works just as fine. And we'll finish that up with a nice rouge. Okay. Now, we want this to be nice and clean before we go to set that stone, so we're going to take it over to the Sonic. Now would be a good opportunity if anyone has any questions to ask them. We've got our two pieces working right now, or cleaning right now. And we've got about an hour left in the show. I'm going to shoot for 9 o'clock finishing up. This stone won't take much longer. I will probably get started on a third piece. That will be a similar one to this. Scratch that. It will be a diamond solitaire. And I'm going to try to work pretty quick on it. Let's get this clean, and we'll come back. So, into the Sonic it goes. Let's get our other piece out. We're going to give this a nice steam. So, loud noises coming? Okay, our pendant is not clean. So with the Thermalock, typically I would take it, set it inside a beaker of acetone, and let it shake in the ultrasonic. That would take away all this little plastic stuff. I'll put this on close-up so you can see. So unfortunately, I don't have any acetone available. So I'm going to have to wait to clean this up. We'll do that tomorrow. It takes about 30 seconds in the acetone to clean that off, but because this stuff cures or dries and sets up very fast, it's hard to get it all off. Without some kind of chemical. So, we will take care of that tomorrow. Some of this just kind of picks off, but in the acetone it'll come off really quick. I'm going to set it aside for now, and we'll address it a little bit later. Okay, here's a quick preview of the next show. We're going to be setting a lilac sapphire in a similar mounting to the one we're doing right now with the yellow. Whoop. Let's see if we can get a good look at that. Here, I'll just pop this sucker out. A lilac sapphire in a halo mounting. It'll be a very nice combination. So that'll be on the next show. Next, before we finish up for the evening, I'm going to get started on this piece. This is lab-grown diamond. .8 carats. Big guy. And we're going to be setting it in a claw prong mounting. Let's take a quick gander at how well this matches up. Should work just fine. So we'll get to that shortly. Right now we're going to let that sapphire ring sonic for a little bit. Let's take a quick look at this mounting and see how well it's going to match up with what we're doing. Okay. So, I said this is a claw prong mounting. This one is made to have pointed prongs toward the stone. So we're going to cut our seats a little bit differently with it. A lot of jewelers will use a setting burr for something like this. I will stick with my 70-degree burr. And I'm going to cut it a little differently on top than I would a standard prong mounting. So, let's take a look in the microscope. So one thing you can notice right away is this has very tall prongs. We're not going to set the stone that high, but that gives us enough prong to work with to make this into a claw shape. When you buy a cast mounting from a distributor like Stellar or Rio, a lot of the times they'll go ahead and have a seat marked in here. Those are good guidelines, but they are not good seats. Never, ever, ever rely on that for a stone setting application, because, I mean, there's a lot of ways to break a diamond. That would be one of them, is to rely on a seat cut by a manufacturer. Okay. So, all it has is a little notch in there. We're going to cut that into a full seat for the size of that stone, and we're going to make sure we leave, or that we cut the inside of these prongs. You'll notice that they kind of go straight up and down from the elbow. We're going to make sure we cut that appropriately so we can bend it down on top of the stone and then shape it into a claw. I am not a big fan of claw settings, or claw prongs, but, you know, the customer's always right. Everybody has their preference with it. I've set them all different ways. So, okay. Now the very first thing I'm going to do, and we're just waiting on that sapphire ring to clean really nicely. We're going to set it next. But the first thing I like to do with these manufactured settings is clean up the area for the culet. And a lot of times I'll have to cut a little bit on the inside of the gallery. The gallery is this ring around the bottom of the prong. I'll have to clean up a little bit on that. I just want it to look nice before I get the stone in there. It's way harder to clean up an issue once the stone's in place than it is when you have the stone out. So, all right. I think our sapphire ring is about ready. this guy out of the way. We'll steam him off. Coming out of the Sonic here. Looks like we're clean. So we're going to go into the steamer from that. After we get it, to give it a quick rinse. Alright, it is nice and clean and ready to set. Okay, got our seats nice and polished, got the inside nice and polished, got the sides of the prongs nice and polished. I think we can drop this stone in and make it happen. Making sure we orient this stone correctly. We're going to do one more check on our seats just to make sure everything is a-okay. And I'm not too happy about it. Oh, I think... I keep turning it the wrong way. Beautiful. That's going to look nice. Made allowance for the height of the girdle. We cut our seats correctly for the unusual shape of our pavilion. And now, I think we can set it. Okay, using these parallel pliers, my favorite setting tool. I'm not going to try to pull the prong down all the way, all at once. What I did notice as I was going around is one prong sits a little further off the stone than the rest of them. I'm going to start with him. This guy here. I'm going to give it a gentle wiggle toward the stone. See if we can get the pavilion to sit nicely. Yeah, I'm not terribly happy with the way that one went. Oh, yes, I am. Okay, that went well. Alright, going to the opposite side. Grab the prong. I'm going to turn it back and forth as I move it. If anyone's out there watching, ask me why. Okay. Just starting to work those prongs into place. I'm not going to get it tight on this first pass. All I'm doing is making sure the pavilion and the prong seat line up very nicely. Okay, so now I'm going to grab the prong like this. I'm going to gently angle the top backwards, and I'm going to move forward with the prong. Same thing, angle slightly backwards, give it a gentle wiggle toward the stone. Still loose, we're getting tighter. The reason I'm angling the top of that backward is we went ahead and cut the top seat a hair shallower because of the height of the crown on the stone. And when we bring the prong in, that gets even more shallow, so we want to make sure that it still matches the facets on top of the stone. Okay. Alright, starting to get tight here. Going to start to work our way over. Okay. Just small movements on this one. I don't want to push too hard, too fast. But we're going to make sure this stone is never going to go anywhere unless we want it to. Okay. That is starting to get nice and tight. Let's take a look at how our pavilion matches up with our prongs on those seats. Pretty nicely there. Hair of a gap here, but we're going to correct that. Same thing on this side, hair of a gap, but we're going to fix that as we go. So, I'm going to grab that guy, I'm going to angle him backwards slightly, and give him a shift forward. Same thing here. Okay. Got a little wiggle room there, but our pavilion is going to match nicely with the prong. Let's take a look at this thing from the top. It looks pretty nice. We want to be conscious because of the shape of this stone. One side might be a little more rounded than the other. Rounded out than the other. And you can kind of tell this edge, or this side of the stone is a little bit wider, and this is a little bit shallower, a little bit straighter. So we want to try to center that in the halo and make it look a lot nicer, if we can, regardless of the way these facets shape. So I'm going to grab this side here. I want it to come over my direction a little bit. Looking at it from the top again. It really is a pretty stone. It's got some almost lily pad looking inclusions here. Lily pads you would say were in peridot. This is a sapphire, so I'm gonna call those fingerprints. Okay. And those are official terms for the types of inclusions. Lily pads and fingerprints. Fingerprints are usually in rubies and sapphires, lab grown. And I think natural. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I was in Mr. Underwood's gemology class. That man is a character. Phenomenal teacher of phenomenal gems. Okay. This is starting to get tight. I'm pretty happy with the way these prongs sit. on the stone itself. I'm going to look at the back here. That prong looks like it got a little out of whack, so I'm going to grab him from the base and straighten him up a bit. See if that improves the position of that prong. Kind of do the same thing with the other. Okay, that's starting to look nice. Let's look at the back of this one. Same thing. Whoop. Just edge him over a little bit. It's probably more of a function of how I was moving the prong forward. But I'm really happy with the way this is going. So let's get this thing tight. So I'm going to grab the top of these prongs. Let's make sure you can see the whole picture here as I'm working. Alright, grabbing the top of this prong, giving it a little wiggle back and forth, and bringing the top of the prong down on the edge. Now, it still rocks a bit, so I'm going to go to the other side first before I tighten that one any further, and bring it down just a hair. Beautiful. That's pretty tight. Now I want to make sure the opposite prongs are down on the stone all the way. Pretty good. Okay. That is a tight stone. This prong is just a hair off the top. So we're going to grab him, work him just a little further down. Okay. Make sure we're still tight. And let's take a look at the level. So, I marked before and then took into account that one side was shaped differently than the other, but the table stayed flat. So, I think we'll go to our front cam for this. I'll show you how I make that judgment. I'm going to look at this stone a bunch of different ways just to make sure we're nice and level. So, one prong a little off, but level front to back. Got a high side. We need to bring one of these prongs down. I'm just going to make sure I keep track of where that is. That'll help us level the stone out. Almost got it level on the first go round. That doesn't happen very often, but when it does, you feel pretty good. Okay, I know which prong to bring down. Let's take a look in the microscope real quick. This guy has to come down a bit. My pliers are not going to be wide enough for it. So we're going to switch tactics here and go with these guys. Just some chain nose pliers. All I'm going to do is gently pull that in. Just a hair. You could see the whole stone move when I did that. Still a little off. So let's do it this way. I'm going to pull it toward the prong next to it. And then this way. Take a look at our level again. That looks pretty level in our mounting. So as long as it's still tight, we're going to call that set. Very tight. So I noticed as I was pulling that prong over that this doesn't match exactly. So I'm going to fix that. Looks good. Okay. Now we're going to take off the tops of these prongs and go from there. Okay. So I'm going to do this with a sanding disc because I can see where it's at and I can manage how much of the prong I take away. Alright, whoop, sanding disc, kind of fine paper here, and chuck that up in our, no I'm not, I got a bigger mandrel here than I thought I had, so we're going to have to go into our flex shaft. There we go. Alright, I'm going to take just the tops of these prongs off. I'm going to avoid touching that stone. The last thing I want to do is braid it. You have to work pretty hard to abrade a sapphire, mainly because of the Mohs hardness scale. But it can be done. Just gonna take a little bit off that. These are kind of tall prongs, so I think I might use a saw. If I can turn this correctly. Well, no, scratch that. I don't want to do that. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. But I'm going to use a slightly smaller sanding disc. I think you can control them a little bit easier. That's just my opinion on that. Now, these are made to go on a snap mandrel, but for some reason I can't find any of my snap mandrels. Okay. Oh, LRJ 109 says that microscope camera isn't showing. Let's go back to that. I think I fixed it with... I had a slight issue with that earlier. If it isn't showing now... It's coming through on my end, so you may be a little behind in the broadcast. So it should be showing now. Okay. Just a little snap disc. And grind those down just a hair. Approximately to where the table is. Being very careful not to touch the stone. Okay. All right, I feel good about that. Oh, looks like we're good now. Okay. Let's go to a cut burr, making sure we get the right size. Oh, baby. That might be a hair big. We'll go ahead and take it down with this, and if we need to go smaller, we can. Okay. Make sure we stay off the stone in this case. That's a nice cut burr. And if we have any little flanges of metal, we'll come back and address them with the graver and polish. Polish will do the trick for that. After we take off the bulk of any metal that's still on. We are getting on 9 o'clock, so I'm probably going to wrap it up after I get this guy squared away. We'll give him a polish, make the prongs look good. I'll show you the finished product. Once again, if you're watching now, you can purchase any of the products I made tonight. Just contact me through my website, jacksonfamilyjewels.com. jacksonfamilyjewels.com. I'd be happy to set you up with one of these. Now, they won't go live for purchase on the website, but if you contact me, I can make it happen. Okay. Now, one thing we want to be sure of is that all of our prongs, after they're burred, are about the same height. That's kind of hard with these natural cut stones, or native cut stones, because sometimes the girdle on one side is very tall and sometimes thin on the other. You can get kind of a wavy effect, and having one prong be, or having prongs match to each other across the stone might look good from the top, but then you look at it from the side and you've got a very big discrepancy in how tall the prong is. Okay, pretty happy about that. I'm going to pop this sucker off the block. Oh no, our microscope camera isn't working again. That's okay. We're almost done with that part of it. Let's just go back to close-up. All right. So we've got our prongs nicely rounded. We're going to check and make sure that they are at the same height all the way around. And in this case, they are. Just going to turn it, make sure that they're all nice and even. Now I'm going to go through. The cut burr will sometimes leave a little flange of metal over the front of the stone. I can address that in a couple of ways. Most of the time I do it with a graver. That's what I'll do here. And we can talk about the different ways when I get to those projects. There's my graver. Okay. And turn the light down a little bit on the microscope cam so you can see it from the close-up. And I'm just going to go around the tips of this with the graver. Take off any of these little bits of metal, and you can drag the graver backwards to burnish a little bit of metal down on the stone if it doesn't fully make contact. In this case, I'm using a knife graver because I want to get inside these angles really nicely. A knife graver is straight on the sides down to a point. The other option in that case is an onglet graver. It has a rounded belly down to the point, still sharp on the point, but rounded down to it. Different applications for different gravers. I like the knife graver for this because you can cut really close to the front of those prongs. Okay. Let's polish the prongs, get it clean, and I'll show you the finished product. Some of the tops of these. And keep a nice round shape as we go. Okay. Feeling pretty good about this. Now, anytime I work in one direction, I try to come back and work in the opposite when it comes to polish. Don't always have to do that, but it's good to do on round objects like this. Alright. So, very briefly, we're going to come in. We're going to make sure these halo prongs are nice and polished, nice and clean. All right. That is our finished product. Only other things I would do with this are take it to a larger buff, very, very briefly polish it with that buff to clean up any scratches on the shank, polish the inside. This being 14 karat, it is when you polish it, it loses any rhodium plating that might have been on it from the manufacturer. So I'll have to go back and rhodium plate that. But that will be a project for another day.